Hey everyone, welcome to Journey to the West. I'm Jay and I'm joined here with Sen today,
Hi everyone, I'm Sen.
and we're gonna be talking about some recent news and seg into a talk about tribalism. So, starting off, there was a performance, actually a concert at Carnegie Hall, that recently stirred up a lot of backlash. And Sen, if you'd like to just explain the whole thing going on there.
Yeah, so this article on the New York Times got released like maybe just a few hours ago from us recording this, but it was about an act that starred Yuja Wang, who's like a very famous pianist. I think they were like a duo that do acts together. So another pianist called Joo and Alexei Igudesman. And they were like a medley of songs from the West Side Story. And the whole show or like thing, the act they did was called The Clone, which is also uploaded on YouTube. That it's kind of like a skit they made, and it basically stars Yuja Wang as the clone, and she basically comes out of this box, and then as she like steps out of the box, they remark that it smells like orange chicken, and then they mock the Chinese language, and then the clone breaks down, and then they laugh that it's made in China, and then I think one of the other jokes kind of falls into hypersexualizing her, not just as a non-human object, but so they say stuff like, oh God, she's so hot, or how do you turn her on? And then I can think of a couple of ways.
Ew.
And the Asian guy, Joo, is also like, there's like a little scene of him like next to the clone, and he's cross-dressing, so he's like cross-dressing as an Asian woman and she's the clone of him. I don't know how to feel about this, because and like the article just goes into the whole like, oh, satire thing. Like it's not actually excusing it. It's quite I wouldn't say it's that too scathing of a critique, but it's kind of questioning like, why would you do this type of tone. And she's going, oh, it's a joke, I'm Asian, like blah 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 blah. I don't know. The satire excuse specifically is not working, only because the butt of the joke at the end of the day is still Asian people, it's still Asian women, you know. So to say that this is satire and she's just making light of her experiences as an Asian woman, it doesn't work. Because like when people watch the show and then they walk out, what are they going to take away from this? That, oh, it's okay to make jokes about people with the surname Wang, going, oh, Yuja Wang. That was like one of the jokes, like a play on her name. And I'm sure that it was drawn from some kind of real life experience, like, but people want to go out and just crack Asian jokes. This doesn't really stimulate people's minds and make them second guess their misconceptions or like their, you know, racialized stereotypes of Asian people, and it doesn't make people realize that these jokes aren't okay.
Well, yeah, that reminds us of, I think one of the first pods that we ever did was talking about this topic with BBC's, I forget
Chinese
what that's
burn?
called. Oh, yeah, Chinese burn. It's the same problem in that they said that it was meant to be satire and draw upon the experiences that they had that were racist in real life, but the way that it was delivered, didn't make it clear what behavior was wrong. And so it just came across as permission to be racist rather than condemning the racism itself.
I think Yuja Wang is also British.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Possibly. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know. Satire needs to be smart. It needs to get people to rethink the preconceived notions.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like cracking Asian jokes. I don't even think this is satire.
It's kind of lazy, actually.
Yeah, they're not even funny jokes. A subversion would be to like point out the white male in this whole thing, you know, and be like, hey, he's being a bit of a shitty person in all this, you know. But the target is still Asian people, Asian women specifically. I don't know how, like, she's saying in this whole thing, like, she's getting empowered from this. Like, how? You know, I don't see how it's empowering.
Something that I notice is that when people create this kind of thing, they like to fall back on the whole, oh, I'm just trying to start a conversation. I'm trying to get people talking about this. And I feel like, at least for me, I'm at a point where it's not enough to start a conversation. You have to actually guide it too, which goes back to, like, you know, make sure that it's clear that this is what's wrong, that this is clearly identified. It's not up for discussion at this point. Like, it's not like an opinion. Racism is not an opinion. It's a fact. So I think we need to get out of the mindset of settling for people just talking about it and actually push in some kind of direction that is beneficial to us as people who are affected by racism. Otherwise, this shit ain't gonna change. Basically, combat art. The idea of making a statement that's strong. You know, that's how you empower. You don't give your power to other people to decide whether or not something is wrong for you. You make that decision and you share it with other people. In a positive example, alternatively, I did find one comedian who, you know, rather than leaning on the satirical thing, he actually confronts anti-Asian racism in his comedy. His name is Yuja Wang. And you might be able to find some of his clips on YouTube. I think he performed at the 2010 Correspondents' Dinner, as well as recently on the Colbert Report. And if you get the chance to see his stand-up, I think we'll try to link to his Colbert performance. The closing joke that he ended with was, you know, I have a lot in common with white men. I also have an Asian wife. Like, this is how you poke fun at a real social phenomena and get people talking about it in a way that clearly has a purpose, you know? In contrast to, oh, I know how to turn her on. Like, okay, good.
I'm a literal robot. I'm not even a human in this play that I made. Like, what the fuck? I don't know. I'm still processing this
like, you know what's a good
thing
way to tackle the idea of being an automaton? If anybody's familiar with Janelle Monáe, her last album was called Dirty Computer. And, like, her whole aesthetic and a lot of her concepts in her music have to do with playing this character that's an android and using that as a vehicle for expression, but also to talk about racial discrimination, being queer, all kinds of things like that. So if you want to compare that to this, it's really clear the differences in the messages that are being sent. So, like, you have to really have some refinement to the way you approach these topics so that they're not lost and turn into just plain racism.
I mean, speaking of, entertainers, wasn't there like this another New York Times article written by this Asian woman who wrote this play called like Straight White Men?
Yeah. I wish I could find the interview with her where she was basically saying, it was kind of like an exit interview on like a red carpet kind of thing. And let me find her. I think her name is Young Lee Park.
I know I tweeted about it like ages ago.
Yeah, because we were on that back in the day.
Yeah, before everyone's outrage. Like, fucking look at my tweets, bitch.
Yep, young Jean Lee.
I saw this news randomly. Wait, was it one of the articles I linked to you? I forget.
I think you just started tweeting it and we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I was confused.
Why do white men need to be represented?
It wasn't just that, but that people were like, oh, young Jean Lee made history for being the first Asian American woman and like playwright like on Broadway, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the play's called Straight White Men. Why the fuck would I want to watch this? I know like in Australia specifically there's this woman named Michelle Law, and she wrote a whole thing, and like her play was called was it
single Asian female, maybe
single Asian female, yeah. And I'm like, okay, like that is resonant at least. Like, what the fuck is this though?
It's like manufacturing this weird identity politics for straight white men as though they need it.
The moment I saw it, I'm like, this. She was like, "Oh, the struggle of the white man in this age," and I'm like, what? Are you missing something?
Her article, the New York Times thing, she tries to assert that she understands what intersectionality means and all of that, but if this is supposed to be satirical, this isn't really pushing anyone in any direction to understand the value of identity politics. It's just poking fun at it in a way that seeks to humanize straight white men as though they're reviled for no reason. And like the whole approach, it doesn't make sense.
No, the crazy thing is, I was reading was like, she's like, oh yeah, I can really empathize with the white man, like, because I think they were asking her how difficult it was, and she's like, oh yeah, it was really like, I could have put myself in their shoes. I'm like, what's wrong with you? What the fuck?
Like in what white supremacist universe do you need to manufacture empathy for the people the entire society is structured to favor? Like, the problem is not that we don't have empathy for white people. It's that white people, according to scientific studies, fail to have empathy for non-white people.
Mm-hmm.
Value the lives of animals over those of people of color. So what the fuck?
There's more animal representation in media than there is of like most minorities, or at least Asian people and like Native, Indigenous peoples. Like, there's a reason.
And something that she said in a verbal interview that I caught, and I wish I could find it, because she basically was saying, oh, when I was growing up, I experienced a lot of racism and felt othered, and I really sympathize with how straight white men are being attacked right now as like, like the identity that you should not have. But like, there's no way to equate that.
She's fucking stupid. She's crazy. I don't know what the hell. Where does she live?
Like, you have to really not understand. Oh, she lived in Washington.
What kind of place does she live in mental state, and like all the racism she faced, and like she wakes up and goes, I'm going to write a play for white men, like.
And again, she tries to say that this is meant to start a conversation to make people uncomfortable, so they start talking about these things. But like, without direction, what purpose does this serve? Like, we're already all talking about it, so what are you adding to this that makes it different from the discussions that we're having. And like, at least from my view, it's not as useful because it doesn't say anything meaningful. Again, we need more combat art. God
Yeah,
damn
and
it.
we can't rely on, or just because they have an Asian face or Asian name doesn't mean that they're going to represent our interests. Like, I'm not going to fucking celebrate.
That's some dumb shit.
People were lauding, because I was, like, I try to keep up with the news, and I saw, like, oh, first Asian playwright, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I look up what she wrote, and I'm like, why is this being celebrated? Why are people, like, going around being like, she is the beacon of Asian American entertainment? What is she doing? People thinking that this is going to open doors for Asian people. I'm like, this is going to open doors for tokens. This is going to open doors for people who are self-interested and just want to get ahead by themselves. This doesn't benefit anybody. This just benefits a few individuals who will sell out and make money. I know people want to, like, hop on, like, oh yeah, Crazy Rich Asians did it for Asians. And I'm like, okay, if within the next 2 to 5 years I don't see any Asian, like, flicks, then it's obvious that who's profiting off of this fake woke, branding. Or
yeah, just the individuals involved.
Yeah. I do recall, like, she did mention she didn't want to be, like, lauded for being an Asian woman writing plays, even though, like, a lot of these news article titles would just put Asian woman, like, so
I don't have color blindness. Like, I don't want to be seen as an Asian person.
Yeah, she doesn't want to be seen as an Asian person writing anything, because she just wants to be seen as, neutral or white, as you would call it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we should stop claiming people who don't want to, who literally just don't want to be claimed as Asian, even though they are Asian.
See, that's the problem.
Yeah, it goes,
like, the fundamental problem in that thinking is that in order to be seen as a person, you have to be seen as not having color, aka the default, aka white.
No, but that's the thing. Like, a lot of these people don't want to claim Asian, and I'm not talking about, like, they're denying that they're, like, racially Asian. They want to deny the identity that comes with it, like the social, like, political identity that comes with being Asian, and that's what it is. So, again, stop claiming people who don't want to be Asian, who don't want to represent us. Like, okay, fine, fucking ignore them. I don't know why people act so surprised when she, like, released that New York Times article sympathizing with, like, white people. Like, it's in her work. It's embedded in how she, like, speaks about these issues.
And that reminds me, whenever people of color speak up about racism, they're often called tribalistic. And, especially in the political landscape, because, art and politics can often be intertwined, are blamed for dividing the country, which is basically a way to dismiss the thoughts and just anybody who's POC who's speaking up and challenging racism, call them tribalistic to belittle what they're saying, to basically dehumanize them, because, the word tribalistic kind of implies that you are inferior. And basically refuse to acknowledge that racism is a problem. So whenever you see tribalistic, it's often politicians who are saying, we need to, stop being at each other's throats about race, even though there are real consequences to racism, including violence. They don't want to talk about it. And so they'll say, oh, you're being tribalistic. You're impeding progress. You're dividing the people. And a lot of that...
It's a dog whistle.
Yeah, it's meant to say to other white people, I have your back. And also, if you're a person of color and you understand what this means, it's basically a fuck you.
The thing I don't get is a lot of people adopt the whole like tribalistic thing, Asians going, oh yeah, I agree, we're getting too tribalistic. Like, if you've noticed how like the conception of a lot of Western or civilization in America, Australia, whatever, it's built on white identity. It's built on discriminating and being racist towards minorities. And anyone that thinks that like, oh yeah, like post 19, like, 60s, 70s, things were okay, and now suddenly people are just bringing this tribalistic identity, and I'm like, no, people have been feeling this way, it's just now it's coming to the limelight. And then now, because of social media, people actually have a platform to voice their dissent, where previously people just ignored them and maybe only paid attention to them during election year or something.
Yeah, exactly. People who are upset by this are just shocked that we're actually standing up for ourselves and talking about it instead of being thankful that we're being oppressed. Like,
if they paid attention, they would know that a lot of shit happens that doesn't get on the news,
And on the other side of tribalism, which ties into identity politics, you were talking about how white identity politics basically formed the creation of a lot of white supremacist nations, like Australia, like the US, like Canada, like Great Britain. There's this widespread idea that identity politics is useless, but if white supremacy is founded on white identity politics, then an identity politic for somebody who is not white or for anybody who is a minority and seeks to overturn that power imbalance needs to create an identity politic that is in direct opposition to that inequality, meaning indirect opposition to white supremacy, which is not really something that we see often. It's hard to find in people who are politically active in the Asian community. There's a lot of people who are just too afraid to call out anything that white people do, like violence committed by white people systemically or culturally or even directly toward us. And so I think it's a great measure of, who is actually looking to dismantle the system and who just wants to seek a slightly better place for themselves within it. So you can't really trust every face that you see, going back to that statement we made earlier. And one example that's very political for me would be Andrew Yang. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me and just say that, just because he's not perfect in my eyes, that should be a reason for me to not support him because he's Asian and being Asian is enough. I'm like, he's aware of the issues that our community faces, blah, blah, blah. To his credit, I don't think that he's intentionally trying to drag us down as a group. But especially after listening to the podcast that he did with Joe Rogan and going into more detail about his plans and how he arrived at the conclusions that he does, it's just really clear to me that he has no fundamental understanding of what racism is or what white supremacy is. Because he too subscribes to the idea that politics is too divided and that, we need somebody who can unite the parties and blah, blah, blah. Which is very similar to the whole, we're too tribalistic, Another thing that I noticed is that he claimed that it was economic anxiety that drove poor white men to vote for Trump. and basically drew the conclusion that, okay, racism is a product of economic anxiety. Like, people suddenly become racist when they are out of a job because they like to blame the other for that problem that they're personally experiencing. That's not true. Like, there are plenty of racist wealthy people. It's like how Ambien is blamed for making somebody say racist things. Like, that's not an excuse. It already exists. It's just a trigger for you to be open about it.
A lot of these white elites and politicians, they do the whole, especially like on the left or liberal side, they try to scapegoat the poor people by blaming racism on poor people. You know, they marginalize that and say, oh, we're the good whites and those whites are bad. And, like, I can't relate to those like poor people in the Midwest because they're just backwards or some shit, you know, like.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It's shifting the blame.
Yeah. And it's also kind of like going back to what like white identity and tribalism and blah, blah, blah is. It's when were we ever united is the question I want to ask people. Like, people going, we're too divided now. Back in the day, things were way better. I'm like, yeah, when all the white people were talking over everybody and
were lynching us for fun.
Yeah. When were we united? Like, when? Tell me when, because I don't fucking know when. Even white people weren't united, really, in a lot of ways, so I don't really get it.
It's an ideal that is just kind of associated with nationalism. I imagine, like, oh, we're all members of this country, and therefore we should all be aligned on everything. But, like, it's not a matter of opinion. There are facts that are true empirically. Like, racism is real, and it's not because of your socioeconomic status. I mean, if we even just look at the statistics for who voted for Trump, he won wealthy whites and he won poor whites. Didn't really matter what socioeconomic status you had. All it mattered was that you were white, including white women. So it's a really poor excuse to say, you know, racism isn't really a fundamental problem. It's just socioeconomic anxiety. So that's one of the major reasons why I'm not a fan of Andrew Yang, because his solution is basically to make sure that white people have job security in order to prevent them from being racist, which is very stupid to me. I'm sorry, not sorry. And he's such a corporatist. Like, his only perspective is from the point of view of somebody who owns and runs a business. And so he's anti-organized labor because he believes it impedes progress. Well, like, no shit. The reason that labor organizes fundamentally is because they're being fucked over by management and they want to retain rights. But, like, his approach is, well, we can convince these businesses to treat their workers better. How?
Oh my god. Has he ever worked like those type of jobs? Fucking hell.
Like, just because you're a benevolent employer doesn't mean that, like, fucking Jeff Bezos is going to give a shit about the common man when he can't even, like, provide basic benefits to his own employees. Like, he just gives a shit about getting rich.
Even if benevolence, like, if he's like a good guy, doesn't mean his workers are getting treated right either. Because if you look at how fucking management always fucking works, people get screwed over by shitty supervisors.
Because you want to maximize your own profit. Like, that's your goal. You're not thinking about taking care of people, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's like what you can get away with.
It's capitalism for you.
Yes. And so instead of challenging that power dynamic, or at least giving less power to corporations so they can't influence politics so much, his strategy is to convince corporations to willingly accept things like taxes on their earnings, with the promise that if you tax them, that means more money goes into the pockets of consumers who will then be spending more money, who will then be putting more money into their pockets, which is the most roundabout, ridiculous thing. It's kind of like reverse trickle down. Well, like it doesn't make sense because depending on your class, where are you going to be spending that money? Like if it's a tech giant, am I going to be buying a fucking new iPad just because I'm getting an extra stipend each month? No, I'm probably going to be spending it on things that I need, like food and shelter. I just don't think his plan is very well thought out. I'm sure he's well-meaning, but he doesn't challenge the fundamental problem of the structure, which is the fact that it's fucking white supremacist and classist at its core. It just maintains these classes and this stratification. And I can't bring myself to support his policies just because he's Asian and he seems like a nice guy. And he seems to sympathize with whatever Asian issues that you bring up to him, which, by the way, are all model minority issues. I don't know, he doesn't represent me. And do so at your own risk, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it seems like in a lot of these convos, like the working class, Asians are usually left out or they're forgotten. And like, again, no one's on social media speaking for them. So they've kind of, I guess people just focus on representation, model minority, all the same bullshit all day, every day.
It's like you can think beyond the box here. Like, Asians aren't just fucking model minorities, in fact. We aren't, by and large. Huge wealth gaps. Huge gaps in education. There are those of us who are being fucking deported continuously. The vast majority of us came from countries who were bombed by the US or had our economies fucking ruined by Western powers. There's so much that we've been talking about that is never addressed in mainstream Asian American politics, and it's sad. So don't settle for that kind of stuff. Like, I know that there's a lot of desperation, but we can do better. Anyway, I think we're going to end there. Be mindful of who you're supporting. Make sure they actually understand what the problems are so they can fix it. Because if they don't, how are they going to fix it? That's pretty simple. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, guys.